The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Oh, do we have stuff to unpack from the weekend? My goodness. Yes, it's a holiday Monday, and yes, the roads are terrible. So, well, they're better now, but they were really bad earlier today. And we're supposed to, I guess, get more snow tonight. It's not going to be much, maybe a couple of inches, but tomorrow is not a holiday, and it's liable to screw up the commute. But, you know, you'll deal with it, right? And nowadays, you can work from home, so it's not as big a deal. Schools will probably be postponed or canceled tomorrow, so you may have the kids running around. Whatever. It was really an amazing weekend with things that happened in upsets and the emergence of C.J. Stroud, not that we didn't know about him before. And, oh, man. Oh, yeah, might as well start with this. It was 51 years ago yesterday that I had the worst sports day of my life. Sports really mattered then. I was 14 years old. At 14, you're at the peak of your sports fandom. The wins are better, the losses are worse. It takes you a long time to get over a bad loss. And on January 14th, 1973, I went to the Maryland-North Carolina State basketball game at noon. This is where the network started to get smart about attaching programming to the Super Bowl. They knew people were going to stay home and watch the Super Bowl later in the day, so you had to have some lead-up programming. And they took the Maryland-North Carolina State basketball game. These were two of the top, I guess, 5 or 6 teams in the country. It was Cole Fieldhouse, and they decided to move it till noon on Sunday. They didn't really do things like that in those days, but they did it, and David Thompson is the best college basketball player I ever saw. He was tremendous, and NC State was a great team. They were ineligible for the tournament, the NCAA tournament, because they had cheated to get David Thompson, which a year later proved to be worth it as he led them to the national championship. But on this day, January 14th, 1973, it was a great game at Cole Fieldhouse, and Maryland had a tremendous team. Tom McMillan and Len Elmore were juniors. John Lucas was a freshman on that team. They had Bob Bodell in the backcourt with them. Jim O'Brien was a terrific player. They were good. And NC State was just a little bit better because they had, I think, the best ever college player. Now, he had some problems with drugs in the pros and probably didn't live up to his expectations. But in college, I don't think there was ever anybody better than David Thompson. And sure enough, NC State missed a shot. Thompson had a putback just before the buzzer, and NC State won by 1 or 2. And I left Cole Fieldhouse feeling devastated, but not as devastated as I would feel later in the day with the Redskins playing the Dolphins in the Super Bowl. And even though the Dolphins were undefeated, Washington was actually favored by a point. And what the no-name defense of the Dolphins did was they decided to shut down the offensive MVP of the league, which was Larry Brown, and dare Billy Kilmer to beat him with his arm. And Kilmer couldn't do it. And in those days, they had the goalposts up against the goal line. And Kilmer, actually, I can just see it in my mind's eye right now. He had Jerry Smith wide open in the end zone, and Kilmer hit the crossbar. And Redskins lost the game 14-7, despite Garo Yepremian trying to give it back to him. And Yepremian with that famous play where the kick was blocked by Bill Brundage, the ball bounced back to him. Instead of falling on it, Yepremian attempted to throw it. It was picked off by Mike Bass, who took it back the other way for a touchdown. But that was the only scoring that Washington did that day. And it took me a whole week to get over that awful day of sports in 1973. You know, like if that's the worst thing that should ever happen to a person, you know, so be it. That's a good life. But as a sports fan, I can't remember a more devastating day than that. Yesterday wasn't among the greatest ever, but it was pretty darn good. It started early in the day, 2 o'clock, and I probably wouldn't have watched much of this game had the Buffalo game not been postponed until today. But Maryland tipped off at 2 at number 10, Illinois, and they played one of the best games they have played over the 2 years that Kevin Willard has been the coach. They got big games out of their big stars. Jameer Young finished with 28 points and 8 assists, and Julian Reese had 20 points and 11 rebounds. You get performances out of those two, Mr. Inside, Mr. Outside, you got a pretty good chance of winning. And they beat a really good team on the road yesterday and won convincingly, 76-67. And then after the game, there's a little bit of controversy, which should make it interesting when Illinois comes here another month or so. Jameer Young in the handshake line was snubbed by an assistant coach for Illinois and got into kind of a shouting match, and he was escorted to the locker room. They said, no, wait a minute. You got to do the post-game radio interview with Johnny Holiday and Chris Nockey. So they took him back out on the court, and he did that. And then, Maryland went into the dressing room, and this was Kevin Willard talking to his team about what they accomplished. I don't think there's any doubt. It's the biggest road win in the regular season that Kevin Willard has had since he became coach over a year ago.
That's a big-time effort. Big-time effort. Going on the road, tough place to play, really good basketball team. But it's what we've been preaching all year. It's like you just got to keep playing defense, and eventually your offense is going to start getting it. And, you guys have kept playing defense, and our offense is getting there. Our offense is getting there. At the end of games, though, especially on the road, you have to make sure you earn your fouls. You can't turn it over, and you got to rebound the basketball. Like if we had rebounded the basketball a little bit earlier at like the 6-minute mark, that's like a 15-point win. Okay, so you're playing your offense. I keep saying it. Reward yourself. Reward yourself. I'm super proud of that. That's a big time win.
Yeah, it was. They shot the ball well, which they haven't done all year long, and to come away with a road win like that, to me, may turn the season around. We'll have to see. They got, again, big performances from the big players. Dante Scott didn't have a great game, but he's been invisible in some of them. I mean, realize that Julian Reese has had 2 games this year. One he didn't score at all, and the other he had 1 point. You can't have that. You can't win like that. And they, their 3-point shooting, which is the worst in the country, wasn't great. They were 4 for 17 yesterday. But they didn't really need that. They got it done on the boards. They out-rebounded a bigger team, 37-35, and they pretty much stayed out of foul trouble. They did a really good job in this game, and we'll see. They got to go to Northwestern on Wednesday night. If they can keep it going, back-to-back road wins would be huge. And their record is, it's not that great right now. They're 3-3 in the conference, 11-6. Overall, they can't lose too many more games if they're going to be in the tournament, but that's the kind of win that could really turn the season around for Maryland. All right, let's get to the football. And before I dance on the season grave of the Dallas Cowboys, I did want to pass this along because this took up a lot of my tweeting time over the weekend. As we had a tweet that came out from Mike Greenberg on Saturday night, and it was after Houston had beaten Cleveland. I mean, Joe Flacco's carriage turned into a pumpkin. He had a pair of pick sixes in a game that was over pretty early as the Texans won 45-14, and C.J. Stroud, who has been terrific all year, came through in a big game. This is where you really judge a rookie, and he was 16 of 21 for 274 yards and 3 touchdowns. They didn't even play him much in the fourth quarter. But Mike Greenberg, who always likes to run to the front of the parade, tweeted out this: with this performance and at least one more game to come, C.J. Stroud has probably locked up the greatest rookie season any quarterback has ever had. Okay, let me point out to Mr. Greenberg, who likes to educate his audience. He'll often say, for those of you who are too young to remember, ... And he likes to tell you about how he covered Michael Jordan and how he's a student of the history of the game and all that. He did couch it a little bit by saying probably locked up the greatest rookie season. But I might point out that Sammy Baugh, who was drafted by the Redskins just before they moved from Boston to Washington, led the team to the NFL championship, playing both ways, and in many ways revolutionized the game. It became more of a passing game under Slingin' Sammy Baugh. And you may look at this like, oh, yeah, well, that was like in the 1930s when everything was in black and white, and, they didn't have linebackers who could run 4-4. You can only judge a player on how he did relative to his time. Sammy Baugh was born too early to play in this era. C.J. Stroud wasn't born yet. We can't make that comparison. You can only compare a player to how dominant he is in his era. And at 1950, the first half of the 20th century over with, they named the greatest professional football player of the first half of the 20th century, and it was Sammy Baugh. And he was one of the inaugural members of the Pro Football Hall of Fame when it opened in 1963. So, Mike, let's just stop this. Trying to show everybody how smart you are and running to hyperbole like this. Stop a minute. And everybody else who wants to totally discount everything that happened before ESPN, realize that we had great athletes. Bart Starr doesn't get credit, but he won 5 championships in 7 years. The first 3, they had no Super Bowl, but he won the first 2 Super Bowls. Does that count? I don't know. I mean, we're just rushing to say greatest ever, greatest ever. Stop. Realize that great things happened before. And before you rush in there and put yourself out, look at me. Look at what I've done. I have done all the research, and this is the best ever. No. There were great ones before. There were great ones before that. All right, back to my great day from yesterday. Talked about the Maryland game. Then we get the Packers playing the Dallas Cowboys, and traditionally, not traditionally, but more so now than ever, when you win the flip, you usually defer, and that means you get the ball to start the second half. And the Packers won the flip, and they said, "We'll take the football." And this proved to be a very smart strategic move, as they took the ball and they took it right down the field and scored on the Cowboys. And they kept scoring and kept scoring. And Dak threw a pick 6. It was 27-0 late in the first half. The Cowboys got a touchdown on the last play of the first half, but the Packers just kept on coming. The final score doesn't tell you anything about this game. If you didn't see the game and you see the score, 48-32, you think, wow, wild shootout. Must have gone back and forth. Maybe the Packers made a few great plays at the end of the game. No, they made a lot of great plays in this game. They dominated this start to finish. This was a butt-kicking, which we rarely see in the playoffs, and we rarely see it happen to a home team. But it happened to the Dallas Cowboys, who had the second-best record in the NFC, and got to host this game. And had they won, well, I guess they still would have had. Yeah, they would have hosted a game next week. But the Packers, by winning, they go to San Francisco on Saturday night. And so now you wonder about the future of Mike McCarthy, the coach of the team. Jerry Jones, the owner, always talks to the media after the game. Didn't really give us anything on what he's planning to do about Mike McCarthy, but said this about where he stands and where this game is. And boy, if you love Schadenfreude, this is just for you. Here's 2 minutes of pure Schadenfreude as Jerry Jones laments the blowout loss to the Green Bay Packers.
I thought we were in a position, everybody in this room thought we were in a position to advance this thing in the playoffs and maybe get as far as our dreams might take us. We didn't do it. I don't have any thoughts about the reasons why or anything to do with the coaching, anything to do about the players. I want to give Green Bay a lot of compliments and credit. This is one of my most surprises since I've been involved in sport, period. So this is that degree. I know how disappointed everybody is. That's all my comment.
In terms of playoff losses, where does this one rank for you?
Well, I don't have really. I can't reach back and look at a playoff loss, but this seems like the most painful because we all had such great expectation and we had hope for this team, and thought that we were aligned in great shape, and it didn't happen for us, and it's as fresh on me right now as it is on anybody else. But I won't get into any of the addressing of any aspects of any part of it. From the coaching to the players to what's around the corner. On a personal basis, I'm floored, and so not that there's any world's smallest violin for me being floored. I get that, I understand that, and I know where the responsibility starts and ends, and I've got that real clear, and I know that.
Yeah, he knows it, and means what for Mike McCarthy? Look, his record in 4 years in Dallas, pretty good. 42-25, 3 straight 12-win seasons, NFC East titles in 2021, 2023, but he won 1 playoff game. And yesterday wasn't just a playoff loss. It was a bad playoff loss. And so, obviously, the question has to be asked.
Jerry had said we'll take it game by game regarding your job status. Do you think this could lead to a coaching change?
I think the biggest thing is, we're disappointed. I got a whole team in the locker rooms that's hurting, and that's I haven't thought past the outcome of this game.
1 year left on his contract, so Jerry's got a decision to make either way, because you can't go into next season McCarthy being a lame duck off a loss like this. So you either got to extend him or you got to fire him. My guess is he fires him. There have been coaches like this who have done very well in the regular season. Brian Billick, with one of the great defenses of all time, won a Super Bowl with the Ravens, had them in the playoffs on a regular basis, but never got back after winning in what was his, I guess, second year on the job. So, these kind of things are judged on how you do in the postseason, and he didn't get it done. They also have a decision to make on Dak Prescott, because he's got 1 year left on his contract, and he's due to count $59.4 million against the cap. They've said they want to keep him long term. He led the NFL in touchdown passes during the season with 36, cut his interceptions down from 15 last year to 9, and completed a career-high 69.9% of his passes. He had a good year, but this is what you remember. And, is there going to be a reset in Dallas? Do you get a new coach? Do you get a coach who says, yes, I can fix Dak Prescott in postseason? Or do you completely move on? Again, as Jerry said, there's the world's tiniest violin for him. But what a day. What a day yesterday. Seeing Maryland play its best basketball game of the year, and seeing the Dallas Cowboys, boy, that was fun. As Green Bay just poured it on and poured it on and poured it on with a quarterback who was in doubt at midseason. They went, well, you had Brett Favre, you had Aaron Rodgers, and sure, Jordan Love. You couldn't expect it to continue. Well, Love did some Rodgers-like things yesterday, and he, I think, cemented himself as the future of the Packers for some time to come, and he's going to be due to a big payday. Remember, he went into the season with the team not picking up his option, not picking up his fifth-year option as a first-round pick. And so he now has the opportunity to sign the long-term contract. And regardless of what they do next week at San Francisco, next Saturday, he has stepped in and looks like it's an unbroken chain. And if you, I guess, would ask most Packer fans, even a healthy Aaron Rodgers, who would you rather have, Rodgers or Love? I think right now at this point, you'd rather have Jordan Love than this Meshuggah Aaron Rodgers, who at age 40 is coming off a very serious injury. It may not be Aaron Rodgers again. What a day. What a weekend. And it continues today. Thanks to the crazy snow in Buffalo. We got a game this afternoon, Steelers and Bills, 4:30, and then the Eagles and the Buccaneers, and they will go to Detroit. And Detroit is a great story in itself. We'll deal with more on that coming up at 10 o'clock. But next, I want to get to what John Keim did recently, last few days. He talked to the insider for the 49ers with ESPN. Essentially does the same job in San Francisco that John does here. His name is Nick Wagner, and he knows a lot about the 49ers and their organization. He's been covering them for about 7 or 8 years, is very familiar with Adam Peters, the new general manager. And by the way, that's what they're calling him. It's not president of football operations. This, I guess, will be clarified when there's a news conference in the coming days. But at the moment, Adam Peters is being identified as the Commanders' new general manager. And if you're wondering what kind of person they have hired, well, you're going to get the picture from Nick Wagner next as we continue with the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Yes, it's a holiday Monday. We've got a Tony Show coming up at 11 o'clock, also 10:45 next hour. Today is the 50th anniversary of the debut of Happy Days. And the character that Henry Winkler played, Arthur Fonzarelli, how he started it out 50 years ago today, and how he finished up with the series 11 years later with his leather jacket winding up in the Smithsonian is part of an incredible story about a television show that was set in an era that had only been gone for a relatively short amount of time. I mean, and I'll get more into this in the next hour, but think about this. Happy Days, which debuted in 1974, was set in the late 50s. So it was a period of time only about 15 or 16 years earlier. But it seemed like a completely different time in America. 15, 16 years ago here would have been, 2009, 2008? Is your world much different than it was then? Hell, we even had smartphones then. So it's really crazy to think that in 1974, we were looking back at the 1950s as almost like a prehistoric era and the great nostalgia wave that went with it that helped to launch the show. But the show became sort of, it became at times really irrelevant what the era it was set in. The acting was good, the characters were good, and it was a sitcom that people loved. That's a time when people loved sitcoms. I don't know what sitcoms are popular now, but there was never a sitcom quite as popular as Happy Days. It was the number one show, and didn't really have a lot of social significance in the way that All in the Family did. And even the Mary Tyler Moore Show, which was groundbreaking, and that there was a single woman who wasn't constantly looking to get married. Those kind of things happened in a period just before that, the early 70s, and by the mid-70s, we had Happy Days. And it's really an incredible story of what the show became. We'll get to that coming up. But I want to talk more about the hire that was made on Friday afternoon. We knew that Josh Harris and his group were pursuing Adam Peters, the 49ers assistant GM. That was their number one target. They wanted to get him. And, this was only 5 days when this news broke, 5 days after the firing of Ron Rivera. So they moved quickly, as Harris said they would. He said that we would be thorough but quick. I'm paraphrasing there, but that was the intent, that they were going to look at things very carefully, but they were going to get things done quickly because they knew they needed a head of football operations before they hired a coach. And there is a delay in hiring a coach, even except for, like, if you want Jim Harbaugh, who's reportedly interviewing with the Chargers today. But if you want somebody who's employed, there's a series of things you have to go through, and even a team that's not in the playoffs, you have to wait some time before you do the hiring. And if their target is, in fact, Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, they're going to have to wait at least another week to interview him in person, because you can't talk to him until his team is out of the playoffs. And a big win for Detroit last night as they stay alive. But this is a huge move for the team. And Tom Lavero wrote a column about this today. He said, it's been the Vinny Serrato clown show, a damaged Scott McCloughan, and the illusion of credibility with Bruce Allen and Ron Rivera. It's been frauds, fakes, and phonies. I would say McCloughan, yes, he was damaged. He came here with a reputation of having an alcohol problem, and when they threw him out the door, they said, oh, yeah, he was a drunk. Supposedly anonymous quotes that were given about him. I don't know exactly what happened. All I know is his first year as general manager, they made the playoffs, and he did some really good things picking up street free agents to do that. And I think if they'd have given him any power, Kirk Cousins never would have gotten away. But they were a clown show, as Lavero said, and that's why they did this. Now, with the hiring of Peters, Lavero writes this paragraph. They are feeling the loss in San Francisco. Quote, this is a significant loss for the 49ers, said the popular 49ers website, 49ers Web Zone. Peters has worked closely with general manager John Lynch during his tenure with San Francisco, contributing to the construction of a roster that reached the postseason for the last 5 years, including a Super Bowl appearance in the 2019 season. That's important, too. Consistency there. They've been a winning organization, kind of like the Ravens, kind of like the Packers now, partly because they've had quarterbacks and they've gone through this unusual progression of them. But this is a really significant hire. And according to ESPN, as Lavero points out, Peters declined requests to interview with Arizona and Tennessee last offseason. Both the Chargers and Raiders had requested interviews with him this offseason. He was either going to stay in San Francisco or he was going to come here. And coming here is a really big deal. John Keim, who covers the team, has been covering them over 25 years, I believe, going back to Norv Turner 1, so almost 35 years, 30 years of covering the team. And this is what he found out when he talked to Nick Wagner, who does the same thing that John does with the 49ers in San Francisco, and talked to him about what kind of person Washington is getting in Adam Peters.
I think it's the best position, the best openings, job, and GM and coach in the league right now. And it's probably been a long time since anyone could say that with a straight face out there. So I think that this situation for Adam is the right thing. It seems like he's going to have a big bulk in the say. He's going to have a big say in the head coach. He's going to have a big say in the structure of the personnel department underneath him. And he's going to get a chance to build something from the ground up. And he did that here as a part of the team, but he wasn't necessarily viewed as the architect, or at least as the lead architect on the project. And so I think that Washington checked a lot of boxes for him. I think it's probably going to be pretty hard for him to leave the 49ers, because I think he's very happy here. But I do think it's the right situation for him. And then as far as what Washington is getting in him, I mean, he is, to me, one of the three most significant figures in the 49ers rebuild since 2017, since John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan got here in 2017. From a personnel standpoint, strictly, maybe the most important figure. And I'm not trying to mitigate, the losses of Martin Mayhew and Rand Carthon and some of the other guys that have left for other jobs over the years. But Adam was the guy who was brought in to be John Lynch's right-hand man, because John Lynch had never been a general manager before, and they wanted to have somebody who could be that guy and kind of help John Lynch learn the ropes and all those types of things, take some of that off his plate. He was instrumental in building the team, particularly with late-round draft picks. The Niners have been as good or better than any team in the league, not just finding useful guys in the late rounds, finding stars. George Kittle in the 5th round, Dre Greenlaw in the 5th round, Brock Purdy in the 7th round, Fred Warner a 3rd round. I mean, I can go on and on. Guys, DJ Jones, who's a really solid defensive tackle for the Broncos, got a $10 million a year deal. He was a 6th round pick of the 49ers. So the track record speaks for itself. I think that it's a great hire for Washington. I think it is a significant loss for the 49ers, but I don't think there's any doubt that it was the right situation. Now, I'm not even sure, John, if he had been, if he hadn't gone to Washington, if there'd been another job in this cycle that he would have wanted. So I do think it speaks really highly, kind of going both ways, that this is a good.
Yeah, it's a great hire. It reminds me of Bobby Beathard. It hasn't happened yet, and he hasn't made a draft pick. He hasn't signed a free agent. Beathard didn't have free agency other than picking up street free agents and undrafted free agents like Joe Jacoby, who he signed. But he had this knack for finding guys in the late rounds. And the 1981 draft, which is considered to be among the best of all time, I mean, brought in guys like Dexter Manley in the 3rd round and Darrell Grant in like the 5th round. And they got a Hall of Famer in Russ Grimm and Mark May, who played a long time. They took him in the 1st round. I mean, you look at that draft, and they had 12 picks in those days. You look at that draft, I mean, there was just top to bottom, they got what they wanted, including in the 12th round when they got Clint Didier. And the way that they got Clint Didier, they weren't looking for a quarterback. Neil Lomax was considered to be, I think, the best quarterback coming out that year. And he played at a small school, Portland State. And he just had these incredible numbers. And he was big quarterback. It wasn't like he was, a small quarterback running up these big numbers against small competition. He was a big guy, big enough to play in the league, like 6'4", 220. And Beathard, doing his due diligence, went out there to look at him. Joe Theismann still had plenty left in the tank. He was probably 30, 31 years old, but you just kind of kicked the tires. So he went out to take a look, and in the workout, in the pro workout that they had, Lomax had asked his top wide receiver, Clint Didier, to come catch passes for him. And Beathard looked at Didier, and he said, well, I don't know if he translates to a wide receiver, but I think we can make him a tight end. And he was a key player on their first 2 Super Bowl championship teams. Sounds like, from what Wagner is saying, Peters is the same type of guy. He looks at players, not necessarily at the top of the draft, although, he's going to be sitting there with number 2, and we may keep it or trade it, but he's got the ability to take maybe a franchise quarterback there. But finding these players in the late rounds is what keeps you competitive, keeps you good, keeps you in salary cap, in an area where you can compete, because you're drafting guys in lower rounds. They don't make a lot of money, and you got control over them for 4 years. So that's key. Also, when you hire the coach, which is what Bobby Beathard did with Joe Gibbs, then you know what you're hiring, you know what the coach is looking for, and you find those type of players for him. According to Nick Wagner, this is exactly what Peters does with Kyle Shanahan.
Kyle Shanahan, to the surprise of no one listening to this, is very particular about what he's looking for in players. And a lot of that isn't necessarily just height, weight, speed stuff that jumps off the tape. Some of it is the stuff that you hear everybody talk about, which is, how much do they love football, which is a hard thing to find out. Guys can fake that. And so it's difficult. So that's a little part of it. But the other part of it is so much of draft evaluation, almost all of it, is projection, right? Like you're looking at a player, what he did in college, trying to determine what his opponent level was like, what his skill set is, and how it's going to translate, not just to a level that's more difficult, but to a scheme that is also more difficult, more intricate, all those types of things. And I think that is really where he made his bones. I just alluded to it. I think a lot of those late round picks are Adam Peters heavy. If you go back through them, where he's looking, let's just use George Kittle as an example. They bring in George Kittle. He was a skinny tight end out of Iowa, didn't catch hardly any passes. He was a willing blocker, but not necessarily like a thumping blocker at the college level. And they looked at him and they said, okay, this guy runs fast. He didn't get the ball a lot. He was in a ball control, as Kirk Ferentz offense that had more punting yards this year than they did offensive yards. And it's always been that way. But when we put him in what Kyle Shanahan's going to ask him to do, is he's smart enough to take on all that we're going to ask him to do, because it's not just, can you go in and run block and then run routes and catch passes? It's when you are blocking, particularly in the run game, angles, understanding timing, keeping guys on track, making sure you're not stepping into the running back's track. All of these things that people don't necessarily think about, but like there's a very specific aiming point that George Kittle might have on a run play that if he doesn't hit it, the whole run play is blown up. And so I say all that to say, I think that's where Adam Peters has done a really good job, where he's identifying the specific skills and the strengths of certain guys, and then figuring out how those project into what the coach that he's working with is going to do. And I do think that, if you're looking at, I know you guys are talking a lot about Ben Johnson out there as the primary kind of number one contender for that coaching job. It makes a lot of sense, because I think Adam Peters would find a little easier transition working with another offensive coach who is going to be demanding and asking for things like that, and they're going to be on the same page.
That's, again, Nick Wagner covers the 49ers for ESPN with John Keim. This is the last part of the conversation, about 20 minutes if you want to watch the whole thing online. John does a great job with these podcasts. And this is the third part that I pulled out of it, and it's about the working relationship between general manager and head coach. Head coach doesn't always have to be hired by the general manager, but I think it works out better in many cases, as it worked out well for Bill Parcells when he won his 2 Super Bowls with the New York Giants. Now, the quote that's so famously attached to him is, if they want you to cook the meal, they ought to at least let you shop for the groceries. Well, shopping for the groceries and cooking the meal resulted in 0 Super Bowl championships for Bill Parcells. Not that he wasn't a great coach, not that he didn't do a great job when he moved on to other places like the Jets and the Cowboys. I'm not saying that. Even the Patriots. He took the Patriots to the Super Bowl, didn't win it. But his 2 Super Bowls were won with the New York Giants, where George Young was the general manager. And they butted heads at the end, which often happens as a coach gets more successful. It happened here with Joe Gibbs and Bobby Beathard. Beathard saw that Gibbs was getting more power there, and it was always up to the owner as to who he would side with when there was a disagreement. So Beathard said, the hell with this. I'm going back home to San Diego and do it for the Chargers. But when they were at their best, they worked together, not always agreeing on things, but working together to get the best players, and Gibbs doing the best job of coaching them. And this is Wagner on why it was so successful with Adam Peters and with Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco, and why this is something you have to look for in whoever is hired with a lot of say, it appears, maybe 95% of the say, with Adam Peters. Again, Nick Wagner with John Keim on the hire.
The single most important relationship you can have in a building, and you're doing this type of job, is between the coach and the general manager. And they don't have to necessarily be on the same page with everything, but they do have to be able to get on the same page. And that can mean disagreements. And in fact, disagreements are encouraged.
Right.
Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch will tell you, I've written about this before. Kyle Shanahan is Mr. Pessimism. He likes to call himself a realist. But John Lynch is Captain America. He's Mr. Optimistic. And so sometimes when they're talking through things, they just inherently disagree on the possibilities. Christian McCaffrey trade is a great example. John Lynch went to Kyle Shanahan and said, let's trade for Christian McCaffrey. I think we can do this. Kyle Shanahan said, no way. We don't have any first round picks. This is going to be too expensive. We can't do this. John Lynch is like, just give me some time. We work on it. Of course, Kyle was on board with the player. It was just the idea of how you get from A to B. Anyway, I say that because I think that is the number one thing. And it's why I admire what Washington is doing, because they're being diligent about trying to get who they want to be their figurehead, but also making sure that he's in place so that they can bring in a coach and make sure that they are simpatico, that they can work together. And that's the whole thing where, the Trent Baalke thing didn't work with Jim Harbaugh. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But let's say you're Washington and you wanted to hire Jim Harbaugh or you wanted to hire Bill Belichick. Well, now you're giving them basically total control here, where I think you're going to get a little bit more of a cooperative with what you're going to look at there. And I think that is the most important thing, because you need that push and pull. It's like creative tension almost, I think, between coach and GM. And I think it's really important to have, so long as at the end of the day, when they do make a decision, even if they disagree on the ins and outs of that decision, when they make that decision, they're on the same page and they move forward together.
And that is what you want. And I think we see that with the Detroit Lions, who may be a similar situation. Not that Washington can necessarily get a quarterback who's been to a Super Bowl, who was the number one pick of the draft and was on the scrap heap like Jared Goff, and turn the team around and turn his career around. But they did it the right way with a general manager in Brad Holmes and a coach who I was so damn wrong about, Dan Campbell. I can't believe it. I mean, I can believe it because I was going on instinct of what I'd seen in the past. But the guy I called the lunkhead for talking about biting kneecaps may be on the verge of getting to the NFC Championship game with a home playoff game next week. And that, to me, is remarkable. But the structure is not. The structure is the best way to do it. You get a strong general manager and a strong coach, and if they butt heads, so what? Let them work it out, and eventually they get on the same page, and they build a great football team. We've seen it with the Philadelphia Eagles, who did stumble down the stretch. We'll see what they do tonight against the Buccaneers. And we've seen it with other teams that have been successful doing it this way. The 49ers, obviously, the Ravens, both of them with buys this weekend. This is how they do it. Strong front office, good coach. They work together. They get it done. Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones, general manager, embarrassed yesterday at home, out of the playoffs. That's kind of the way things go. So I'm really encouraged by this, and really encouraged by what I saw last night from the Lions. Ben Johnson, he had something going right. They always script plays at the beginning. 3 straight drives, they score touchdowns at the beginning of the game. He watched enough film, he saw what he needed to see, and exposed weaknesses. And although it wound up being a 1-point game, it was the Lions who were in control pretty much the whole game. Yeah, there was a late run by the Rams, but it was the Lions who were taking a knee and putting the game away. All right, coming up, we'll get to what the Lions did last night. Also, part of the Brett Favre conversation with Joe Buck. That and a whole lot more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. How sweet was that? Watching what the Cowboys did yesterday. Oh, my God. Green Bay totally dominating that game. I mean, the 48 points should have been 49. Packers missed an extra point. Scoring at will. Dak Prescott throwing a pick six. Jerry just devastated by this. Mike McCarthy, who's had 3 12-win seasons, couple of division titles, could be fired. Maybe Bill Belichick is coming in. Oh, my God. The drama of Dallas. And Washington, everything is peachy keen. They got their man. They got Adam Peters, the general manager they wanted. Right now they're calling him general manager. I don't know if he'll get a bigger title. There's yet to be a news conference for this, so this is still in the reported stage, but not denied by the organization. So at some point this week, we'll all be introduced to Adam Peters, the assistant GM of the San Francisco 49ers, who comes here. And the target seems to be Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. and they've still got at least another game to play. They'll play the winner of tonight's game between the Bucs and the Eagles next Sunday at home. What an incredible job, and let me say again how wrong I was about Dan Campbell when he was introduced as the new head coach of the Lions 3 years ago. I thought, oh my God, what a lunkhead! This guy's going to be one and done. He may not even make it through the season. This is before, we've had the last couple of years, we've had coaches that don't make it through a first full season. But he knew the rebuilding job that he was going to have. They knew what they were getting in him. And talk about a guy who changed the culture. He did that. And in 3 years, he's taken a team that was completely in the toilet. And Detroit, the last time Detroit won a playoff game prior to last night? 1992, just before they came here. That's how long ago it was, because, now you're at the point of not even telling your children about the days of rooting for the Redskins when they were good. You're telling your grandchildren. So this was January of 92. They beat the Cowboys, and they came to Washington for the NFC Championship game and got their doors blown off. Washington had actually opened up the season by beating Detroit 45-0. Barry Sanders didn't play okay, but he wasn't going to make that much of a difference, and it was a totally lopsided win as the Redskins went on to win their third Super Bowl championship as they blew out the Bills a couple of weeks later. And that's the last time that Detroit had won a playoff game. They'd been in it a few times since, but had never won until last night, and they got it done. And when I heard Dan Campbell being introduced, talking about we're going to bite their kneecaps, or we're going to get knocked down, and we're going to bite them again, I thought, oh, my God, this is just dribble this is coaching dribble. This is not going to work. This is an era where you've got guys who are used to using analytics and study the game and have, relationships. And Sean McVay, 30 years old, who cut his teeth on the Shanahan staff and then got his chance with the Rams, and the Rams won a Super Bowl with him. I mean, come on, that's the way you go, not this washed-up former tight end who used to drive a pickup truck around. Well, obviously, I got that wrong, because he has done a hell of a job. And there was a profile yesterday before the game that was in the Washington Post that was written by Adam Kilgore. And I had not heard this story before, but as he was addressing the team a couple of years ago, a false tooth fell out of his mouth. He didn't even pause. He bent down, picked up the tooth, popped it back in his mouth. Didn't even faze him. Detroit linebacker Alex Anzalone said. He said, we were like, what in the world? He just kept going, and nothing happened. It said, when Detroit hired Campbell after the 2020 season, he inherited a team in disarray and a franchise in constant failure. The Lions had gone 14-33-1 in their previous 3 seasons. Their franchise quarterback Matthew Stafford had demanded a trade. They had cycled through 8 coaches plus 3 interims over 3 decades since their last playoff victory. With general manager Brad Holmes' savvy personnel moves providing a foundation, Campbell has led the Lions to the playoff game from last night, and their first division title since 1993, 9 years before the formation of the NFC North. So first time in 30 years they win the division. And then he goes on to write, Campbell's defining trait may be that he cannot help being his genuine self at all times. What you see when he's interacting with the media, people are like, oh, yeah, he said this, or ha, 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 that's funny, left tackle Taylor Decker said. But that's genuinely how he is. That's how he acts. That's how he talks. Campbell has turned around the Lions with an overlooked football intellect, unwavering authenticity, and profound belief in himself. His 10 years of NFL playing experience allow him to relate to players. His consistency allows him to maintain authority. He creates that feeling that he's a teammate of yours, defensive lineman John Kaminsky said. He's the coach, but he's like that fiery teammate. He makes everybody buy in because everyone wants to kill for that guy and play for that guy and get wins for that guy. And by the way, and this is to take nothing away from Bill Belichick and his 6 Super Bowl championships, but one of his ex-players, might have been Danny Amendola, said after they agreed last week, Belichick and Kraft, to part ways, Amendola said, we worked for Bill, but we played for Tom. Well, this is a guy that they're playing for. That's not as common as you might think in football. And tomorrow I'm going to play some interview that Terry Bradshaw did with Joe Buck, where he talked about his coach, Chuck Noll. They were oil and water. They won, but there's no real warm and fuzzy from Bradshaw for him. And there are, even with the success that Joe Gibbs had, maybe there's a few guys who would still run through a wall for him. But, there were some difficult times between great men trying to accomplish something. Doesn't always work out this way. And this is now working for the Lions because of his style that they seem to accept. And then more from the story. With the possible exception of Goff, the Lions have not added any outside players who could have been considered stars before they arrived in Detroit. Their rebuild has been strikingly insular. Almost all of their best players were drafted under Holmes and Campbell, Holmes being the general manager, and Campbell. And you know what that builds? Loyalty. Those guys came in when they were bad. They went through the hard times, and now they're good. They're not outside of Goff, who was left on the scrap heap. Looked like his career was fading out. He comes to Detroit, and they only picked him up because they were picking up the salary. That was what that was all about. They were going to run that out and get their guy. And they've developed him into a quarterback who's now won a playoff game in Detroit and may have them in the NFC Championship game. Here's more from the story. Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson has become perhaps the NFL's most coveted head coaching candidate because Campbell identified his capability twice. Johnson was a low-level offensive assistant with the Dolphins when Campbell became Miami's interim coach in 2015, and Campbell promoted him to tight ends coach. In Detroit, Campbell again chose Johnson to coach the position he played. Then he turned his offense over to him after the first season. At the start of this season, Campbell was one of 9 head coaches who had played in the NFL and one of just 5 who had played in the 2000s. He stocked his coaching staff with former players. He understands the physical and mental demands that the players feel. So it's not all about these analytics guys and these film nerds who become head coaches. Here's a situation where you got a former player who played relatively recently, played in this century, and now has his team firing on all cylinders and winning last night. And you got to give Sean McVay a lot of credit, too, because this was supposed to be a rebuild year. The fact he got him to the playoffs, he deserves a lot of credit for, and that's to take nothing away from him. But to see what the Lions did last night and to see what they've done in this third season under Dan Campbell is pretty remarkable. This is the cleaned-up version of the speech he gave last night after their 24-23 win over the Rams.
We play next Sunday back here at home, guys. Yeah! So look, we got the winner of Tampa and Philly, which is tomorrow. We'll be here at 3 o'clock back at Ford Field because you guys f***ing earned it. Dude, how electric was it out there? I'm telling you what, it doesn't get any better. It's everything you dream of and then more. All right, that's outstanding work. I got 2 game balls. All right, number 1, listen, when you come in 3 years ago, like me and this guy did, and you had a vision and you start working together and you've got an idea how you want to build it and the type of players you're looking for and how you want to go top to bottom, offense, defense, special teams, and you're in f***ing lockstep. You're in f***ing lockstep. I'm telling you guys, it's a shitty business. It ain't always perfect, but we do a pretty good job, dude. Right? But without this f***ing guy right here, man, Brad Holmes.
Yeah, Brad Holmes, and that's what we listened to this in the last hour if you were with us. Nick Wagner, who covers the 49ers for ESPN, was talking to John Keim. He said that's the most important relationship you have with the team is the head coach and the general manager. And in his greatest moment as a coach, after winning a playoff game, he made sure to recognize his general manager, Brad Holmes, and, of course, the quarterback, Jared Goff, as they celebrated in the locker room last night with Campbell.
I absolutely love every single person in this room, man. We were intentional on being about grit, all right, and earning it. I love everybody in here, man. We went through darkness and it shaped us, all right? It shaped us for this moment. I love y'all, man. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Especially this guy, man. Thank you, man. Okay, I'll just say it like this, all right? Hey, you're good enough for Detroit, Jay.
Hey, I love and appreciate you guys more than you fucking know. I promise you that. I love you guys so fucking much. This is just the beginning, boys. This is just the fucking beginning. We got 3 more of these next week at home, at our place, against whoever the fuck wants to come in here. Let's go. Win all 3, 1, 2, 3, win!
And Goff, numbers strong last night. 22 of 27, 277 yards, a touchdown, passer rating of 121.8. This was Jared Goff talking to Scott Van Pelt last night on ESPN.
You guys started as hot as you could. 3 drives, 3 touchdowns. Starting off that way, given all the, I'm sure, nervousness and tension in your city, can we win one? Can we win one? What was the keys to starting off the way you all did?
Yeah, just doing what we've done all year, man. Really, it came down to that. This game got built up so much externally, and internally we just made it about us. Just operate, execute, and be us.
And you were, but the issue for you is that the guy on the other side, who I know you know well, I mean, he's dealing, and that offense was doing a great job throughout. But earlier we had Coach McVay talk about the great job your guys' defense did in the red area. You can't do much but watch, but what would you say about what your defense did against that Ram offense to hold them to 3 on 3 different occasions in the red zone? Yeah, it's a really good offense, man, and our guys showed up today. I think exactly like what you said, right there in the red zone is where they really made it count and got us the ball back in certain situations, and were able to stop them on that last drive. That was huge, getting the negative play there to force the punt. Jared, everybody makes such a big deal about your coach believing in you and putting the ball in your hands specifically. They've got 1 timeout left. It's a 2nd down, and if you throw it and get a 1st down, it's game over. When that call comes in, what's your reaction? Let's go, baby. Yeah, we had St. Brown on just a basically go-win route, and, he's as good as it gets in this league, and, he got himself open, put it right on him. When you get that, and now you know what it is, it's knees, and it's a win, and everybody in your city can exhale. Yeah. I mean, what's the emotion that goes through a team and a city when you can finally put all that talk to bed? Yeah, it was a pretty special environment out there tonight, and one I'll never forget. I'll never forget it. This place is special to me. These people are special to me, and getting that win for them tonight was something else. It was a lot of fun. We were up there for a Monday nighter. It was around Halloween, and it was, that was when the build was happening, right? Everybody was talking about what might be, what everyone hoped could be. Well, now you're in the middle of it, right? Like you put the playoff conversation, they can't win one, to bed. You got another home game next week. What kind of belief exists in that locker room about what you guys can do, Jared? Yeah, we believe it. We can do anything. We got 3 more games and be champions. But yeah, this next one will be at home again, and it'll be fun, man. It'll be another loud environment. Whoever wants to come in here, and it'll be a good one. All right, last quick thought, and I know you've talked about it all week long. We all know that's where you played. We all know you know a lot of guys there. What else is there in this for you tonight to win this game against that team? Yeah, it's so outweighed by everything that it means to our city and our team, and everything that our team has built up to this point. I got here 3 years ago, and we were bad. We were really bad, and being able to build since then to this point right now to win a playoff game in front of these fans after what they've endured, it doesn't get much sweeter. Yeah, it's a great story, and the further it goes, the more amazing it gets. Now, they got a lot ahead of them. They're going to have to beat either Philadelphia or Tampa, depending on what happens tonight. But that's a home game next Sunday, and then likely would have to go to San Francisco. I guess there's the possibility that the Packers could win in Frisco, and then they'd get a championship game. They get the NFC championship game at home. But, a lot has to happen. It's more likely that, and I think they will win against either Philadelphia or Tampa. Tampa, the latest is that Baker Mayfield may not even be able to play tonight. So Philadelphia probably win that game, but they're not Philadelphia anymore. There's a lot of stuff going on there. And Detroit wins that, then you're looking at an NFC championship game, and it's, David versus Goliath, right? Because the 49ers have been the dominant team all year. They would be at home, and here's this team that's made up of these underdogs, these gritty underdogs that everybody likes to be a part of. Last thing is from Sean McVay, yet another coach who is here, by the way, already has had 2 Super Bowl appearances and a Super Bowl championship. You got to give him a lot of credit for this, because this year and last year were considered years where you go, okay, they mortgaged the future in winning that Super Bowl. So they're going to pay the piper. They're going to be a lousy team. And it speaks to how good a coach Sean McVay is, the fact that they got there, they got to the playoffs and competed very well last night against Detroit. For a guy who, going into last season, not this season as much, but last season, okay, he's had his run. He needs a break. He's burning out. Let him do TV, where there were reports he was being offered $20 million a year to do TV. Maybe enough is enough. He got married. He's a dad. No. He's proving that he still can coach. And as he says here,
still loves to coach. This is McVay after the loss.
Congratulations to Coach Campbell and those guys. What a great atmosphere, great environment. Came down to the wire. Thought we had our chances, but I'm so proud of this football team. And, the finality of it is still kind of, it doesn't totally resonate, but man, did I learn a lot and really appreciate this group. They helped me find my way again and how much I love this and love the people that I'm around. And it certainly is always about people. It's these players, these coaches. You don't take away the credit that the Lions deserve. Thought there was some opportunities for us to be able to, come away with that game. I really liked the way our defense played in the second half, and I think the difference in the game was the red area. We were 0 for 3. They were 3 for 3. There was certainly some chances that I think we're capable of executing, and, we'll go back and we'll look at it and always try to be able to learn. But more than anything, just the appreciation and the gratitude is what, what sticks out to me about this team. And, hats off to the Lions for finding a way to be able to get it done. I got nothing but respect for that group.
And who knows what the future is with Matt Stafford. He's probably got to be developing another quarterback, maybe get another couple of years out of him. But can they get back to the Super Bowl with what's left of this team? I don't know. But you still have some great players. You still have Aaron Donald, and you still have one of the premier coaches in the NFL in Sean McVay. All right, more football today. All that football this weekend. Got more football. Got football this afternoon. By the way, it's 10 degrees in Buffalo right now. They're clearing off the seats. Hope to have everything set to go at 4:30 this afternoon. And then tonight, the Eagles at Buccaneers. So be nice and, well, I don't know, probably in the 40s down there, but it's a lot better than it is in most parts of the country. So that's the two games remaining, and then we'll have the complete picture of what the playoffs are going to look like next week. But we do know that the winner of tonight's game is going to Detroit next week. All right, coming up, I want to talk a little bit about this Peacock thing. It got a lot of play and a lot of angst, but in the end, NBC is smiling like a peacock. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
We got Tony coming up at 11 o'clock. Also, these interviews that I've been going through that Joe Buck did 6-7 years ago, they've been released on YouTube. And, boy, they're fun to listen to. And I pull out the parts where stories are told, and some of them are just absolutely great stories about great players and coaches and people in the sports world, and one of them is Brett Favre. Now, I know that Brett Favre is under investigation. I don't know whether he's been fully charged, and if in fact what is alleged is true, it's god-awful that he was misappropriating funds for welfare to build a volleyball complex for Southern Mississippi, where he went to school and his daughter played volleyball. I mean, just awful stuff. But if you separate that out and you look at his career, he had an unbelievable career. And there are some stories that in all these interviews where you hear them and you go, wow, if X and Y hadn't happened, that would have never happened. It's kind of, a what if circumstance, and really have enjoyed going through these. So I've got some of the highlights of that interview coming up at 10:20. Got a few obits to get to before I talk about my experience over the weekend watching this Kansas City game with Miami, and what the fallout is from all those, especially those older folks who wouldn't know what to do to get Peacock on TV. But there's three obits I want to mention. One is Norm Snead, who passed away at the age of 84 following what his younger brother described as a lengthy illness, Naples, Florida, which ironically is where Sonny Jurgensen lives now. But Snead was a great player in the Hampton Roads area, and went to play quarterback at Wake Forest, threw for more than 1,000 yards in each of his 3 years there. He was drafted in those days. You could only play 3 years of varsity, so his 3 years of varsity, threw for 1,000 yards in each of them. 1,600 yards as a senior, selected All-American, picked second overall by the Redskins, first round of the 1961 draft, ahead of some really great players, including Mike Ditka, who's in the Hall of Fame. And he came to the worst team in the NFL, and deservedly so. The 1961 Redskins were all white. George Preston Marshall held the color line, was not going to hire a black player, as he said. I'll start signing Negro players, as he called them, and that was what blacks were called at that time. I'll start signing Negro players when the Harlem Globetrotters start signing white players. Well, eventually he was pressured to break the color line, which he did with Bobby Mitchell a year later, but Norm Snead quarterbacked that 1-12-1 team. And he played 2 more years, 1962 and 1963, as the team got better and got some players like Mitchell, who's in the Hall of Fame, and others, but they were still a really bad team. And after the 1963 season, even though he was young and looking promising, the Redskins traded him to the Philadelphia Eagles, which was a stunner, for Sonny Jurgensen, who had established himself as a great quarterback. He threw 32 touchdown passes for the Eagles. And, you know, the story, you've heard Sonny tell it a bunch of times. He'd just gotten back from visiting with his coach, Joe Kuharich, at the Eagles complex, was having lunch in a deli, and somebody walked in and said, "Hey, Sonny, I just heard on the radio you've been traded to Washington." He said, "What?" Winds up coming here, and although Sonny never started a playoff game here, it was one of the great trades that organization has ever made. Sonny's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And Norm Snead, he stayed in the league a long time. He played, I think, 17 years. Played with the Redskins, the Eagles, the Vikings, the Giants, was on a playoff roster only once, 1971 with the Vikings, didn't play. Played for some really bad teams, but had a long, long career. And at least in this area, is remembered as the one who was traded for Sonny Jurgensen. And when you think of great trades, you think of that one, and certainly Snead for Jurgensen was one of them. So rest in peace, Sam Snead, Norm Snead, not Sam Snead, but Norm Snead, who passed away at the age of 84. Also passing away at the age of 99, Joyce Randolph, who played Trixie in what is the greatest sitcom ever made, The Honeymooners. Only 39 episodes, shot in black and white, shot live. You know, the tapes exist, the 39 episodes, they exist. And the last survivor of the great four of Jackie Gleason playing Ralph Cramden, and then Audrey Meadows, his wife, playing Alice Cramden, Art Carney as Ed Norton, Trixie's husband. She was the straight person of the four. You know, that she didn't have the funny lines, but you had to, you know, have somebody set up Ed and set up Ralph and be the, you know, the kind of the two of them would stand there with their arms folded looking at their dopey husbands, Trixie and Alice. So, you know, she was such a big part of that. And then, you know, that was really her career. She didn't really do much acting after that, but lived to the ripe old age of 99. So rest in peace, Joyce Randolph. You know, at a time when there were shows like Ozzie and Harriet and Leave It to Beaver and things like that, where they portrayed this you know, antiseptic suburban life, they lived in a grimy Brooklyn apartment and they yelled. That's what people do. They yell back and forth. I think the greatest sitcom ever made. And speaking of television, Tom Shales passed away over the weekend at the age of 79. He had left the Post about 10 or 12 years ago. But in his day was the premier television critic in America, won the Pulitzer Prize for criticism in 1988, and you know, did some famous columns, like he used to attack Kathy Lee Gifford for her Christmas specials and her shows Live with Regis and Kathy Lee. He regarded her as like a pebble in his shoe, annoyed by relentless peppiness, boundless self-adoration, and cloying sentimentality. He took a particular glee at bashing her Christmas specials during the 90s. Quote, "That ghastly Gifford grin, ear to ear and back again, seems steeped in self-esteem and almost blinding in its showbiz phoniness. Kathy Lee, Home for Christmas, which included her two mercilessly exploited children and her husband, retired football great Frank Gifford. He compared the special to Soviet torture techniques and directed his sympathy towards her offspring. Imagine the therapist bills those kids will tally up in the years ahead," he wrote. He was a great television critic at a time when network television really mattered in the 1970s and the 1980s, and he is remembered by colleagues as probably the best to do it. So rest in peace, Tom Shales. And then my quick thought on what happened this weekend. I don't have Peacock. I knew my daughter had Peacock, so I called and I said, "Can I come over and watch it at your house?" And she said, "Well, I'll tell you what, why don't you come over and you can babysit, watch the game, and Bradley, her husband, my son-in-law, will go out and have dinner." I said, "Great." So I went over the house. They put the baby to bed, and I watched Peacock, and it was okay. You know, there was a few freeze-ups along the way, but I got to see it. Well, a lot of people my age were freaking out about this. You know, how do you get Peacock? What do you do? And during the afternoon game that was on NBC, the Houston game, they kept showing this whatever you call it. You know, you take a picture of it on your phone, and you can get it, you know, set up on your TV somehow. I had no idea how to do that. So I got to see, I watched the first half. I was tired, and I came home. I knew Houston was going to win, and I came home, and I listened to the second half on the radio, but not Houston, but Kansas City was going to win. And she said when she went to the restaurant, there was a guy at the bar about my age, and he said, "Oh, good, you have the game on TV. I called my son to see if I could get it set up at home. I didn't know how to do it. I thought maybe it was connected to my Netflix." No. So I was panicked. So I'm thinking, and I think a lot of people my age are thinking, well, let's hope this is a freaking disaster for Peacock. They want to stick us up, get the subscriptions. You got to pay $6 or $60 a year. This is awful. Well, this was a grand slam for Peacock. They had a record audience, a record streaming audience. It reached 27.6 million viewers, peaked at 24.6 million in the second quarter. Its audience of 23 million viewers, including Peacock, local stations in Miami and Kansas City, and NFL Plus, set a U.S. record for streaming, up 6% from last year's primetime AFC wildcard game between the Chargers and Jags, which, by the way, was not streamed. So there's going to be more of this. This was a major, major hit for NBC. Did the Taylor Swift thing have anything to do with it? The fact she was at the game? Maybe it did. But if they were thinking, you know, and you were thinking, oh, boy, are they going to take a ratings hit? No, they didn't. It was up from, I guess, cable network, whatever. I don't even know what last year's game was on. It might have been on NBC. Yeah, it might have been on NBC, as a matter of fact, because I think that's the one that Al Michaels did and got all that criticism for not being excited enough for the comeback. But this worked out unbelievably well for them, and network ratings, network broadcast ratings, they're down overall. 16% drop overall broadcast primetime viewership, now at a record low of 2.8 million. NFL games this year up 7% from last year. They just rake in the cash, and people are watching on network TV, and obviously when you stick it to them and make them watch it on Peacock, doesn't bother them at all. So look for more of this, and I'm not so sure a pay-per-view Super Bowl isn't eventually going to happen. Whoa. Tony's coming up next. I will have a show for you tomorrow, and I guess we're back on a regular schedule now. Tony's got shows Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of this week. Drive safely. Hopefully you get to work well tomorrow. Won't have anything to worry about, but we shall see. Enjoy it, and I'll see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.